Hello and welcome to the PhD Life Raft podcast. I'm Emma Brzezinski and today I am talking to the wonderful Arun Ulanhannan. We are talking about comparing yourself to others, which is something I am sure we can all relate to. And Arun has some brilliant advice about supporting yourself, making connections, and then actually supporting others too, creating community through the PhD project. So I do hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, Arun.
Hi, hello.
Thank you so much for being here. We've been in contact for a good while now, and you do amazing work, both in your day job and with your podcast. And I know we'll get to that. But it's so gorgeous to have you here to talk about a particular topic, which I know is going to be of use to lots of people. So thank you so much for your time.
No, thank you for having me. Really appreciate it.
So I'm going to ask you to just introduce yourself and tell us a bit about your journey so far into the PhD and out the other side. So do tell us a bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I actually, the interesting thing is what I studied as a degree and what I did as a PhD and what I do now in my job are completely different. So
Right.
yeah,
Excellent.
I actually,
Excellent.
which is a good example for the listeners of how you can really kind of make your own path. But yeah, I actually did mechanical and manufacturing engineering at university. So a very kind of technical degree. Really sounds exactly what it is like. Is a lot of sort of engineering concepts, and I always sort of knew that I wanted to do something a little bit more kind of user focused and sort of slightly more design led. But I never really quite knew how to get into that field. And it was really just through chance of through the university. They ran some internships over the kind of summer break, and just by complete chance, I came across these opportunities, and that's where I learned about the field of user research and user experience, which is what I do now. And through those contacts at the internship, that's when they told me about this PhD opportunity, and that's kind of what I ended up pursuing. And so the PhD then I did pretty much straight after the university. The interesting thing is it's technically not a PhD; it's actually an NG, which some listeners,
Ah,
they might have heard about this. So it's an engineering doctorate. So you still get the doctorate at the end of you get the doctor title, and it's still a doctorate, as a PhD would be. But it has a slightly different focus in that you have an industrial sponsor who basically funds your research alongside the university. And the idea is rather than doing kind of one single big thesis at the end, you do a series of smaller reports. Which might meet some of the kind of your industrial sponsors' needs. And so this is what I was doing. So my sponsor was Jaguar Land Rover. They were interested in automated vehicles. And so I did a series of studies looking at kind of the kinds of information people need when a car is self-driving. And I did this for 4 years. And at the end, you kind of produce what's called an innovation report, which is kind of like the thesis. And it's the kind of summary of all of the studies that you've done over the last 4 years. So it's a slightly different structure and can sound quite alien if it's, if you never come across it. But
no,
and that was my NGD. Yeah.
amazing. No, I have never come across that before. That's how fascinating is that? Um,
Yes. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant. And I know now it's led to lots of, well, you tell us, where that led then.
Yes. Yeah. And so pretty much, yeah. I mean, after that was my whole introduction to this field of user research. So
Yes.
it's this whole thing and human factors. So it's this whole thing of, all of the products and services and cars and transport, the environment, everything has some element of someone having to sit there and design it. And someone has to decide kind of what this thing looks like or how do we design this car, and what does the steering wheel look like, and the chair, and the interface on the infotainment display, and things like that. And all of that, it can be, essentially led by research. So we get people in, we talk to people, and we understand sort of what are their needs, what they need something to be able to do, and then we implement that research in a design. So that's what I did for the PhD, and now that's what I do in my job. So pretty much that's led to, I do these kinds of user research projects on a variety of different transport fields. So most recently, I worked on sort of wireless charging of electric taxis in Nottingham. So that was called the YSET project. And there we were interested in talking to taxi drivers to understand, this new way of charging your electric taxi, what does it need to be able to do? How should we design it? How can we best communicate the features to you? And that was a lot of interviewing drivers, interviewing actually like council members as well. There's a whole load of people involved in that project. And then another project most recently I've worked on is looking at accessible transport as well. So really trying to understand why transport is generally quite inaccessible for disabled people. Not only if you're a wheelchair user, but if you have a visual impairment, if you're neurodivergent, if you have any other access needs, transport can be incredibly inaccessible. And it's one of the most fundamental things in your independence and being able to access society. So most recently, I've looked at a project where we kind of trying to understand in terms of the streetscape, like the pavements and buses and bus stops, what can we do to make that better? And we've just completed an interview study where we began to get some results from that. So yeah, it's really, from my engineering degree through to doctorate, which was really kind of very focused on cars and trying to make a best car possible in this kind of luxury vehicle segment, to now working in sort of much more, I guess, societally impactful projects, looking at things like accessible transport. I guess it's been, quite a varied journey over the last 10 years or so.
I love it. And something that comes up quite a lot on this podcast is that sense of like, well, what am I even doing a PhD? Why am I even doing this? But this sense of actually all those research skills, which now has direct implementation, like PhDs can be really useful, and those research skills that you build can take you in really interesting directions. And here you are as an example of that.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. I think yes, I enjoyed the topic of the doctorate, but I think absolutely the skills I took away from it, like being confident in presenting, how to sort of communicate ideas to different people. And I think that's one of the great things about the doctorate. And I'm sure you've encouraged your listeners as well. It's really to kind of make the most of all opportunities that come your way in the doctorate, in terms of if you can present to a group in your department, or if there's a conference, or if there's even sometimes, like in my local area, there are a few kind of local science festivals. There's one called Pints of Science, which actually is quite national. Or it might be international as well, where they do science talks in kind of really relaxed environments like pubs and things like that. And, just being involved in that sort of thing, presenting to a general audience and taking those opportunities. I think that's the great thing about PhD, is that you've got the research, but you've got all these other opportunities to be involved in many different things. So yeah, really taking advantage of that is so important, because as you say, it's helped me so much in kind of my career now, and what I take forward out of the PhD.
I love it. So there's the positive. There's the positive of the PhD. But today we're going to be talking about some things that are a bit more tricky and might sort of trip people up. And the topic that you suggested, which I think is genius, is this sense of comparing yourself to others. And I know this will be very relatable to lots of people. If not indeed all of us. Come on, all of us have done that. So talk to us a bit about that, and why you think, why that's a key topic, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it's something that I think when I reflect back on my doctorate, that was probably the biggest thing I really struggled with over the 4 years. And again, it was only kind of like looking back in hindsight. And I think with the doctorate, it was that we started as a cohort of 5 students. So we all started at the same time. And we all were covering slightly different aspects, but we all had the same sponsor. It was pretty much a one program. And so
Right.
it was very easy then to have direct
Right.
peers to compare myself to. um, and I think even if you don't start as a cohort, it can still be a problem. But for me, I think looking back, this was kind of what set it off. And yeah, it was very much a case of whenever there would be someone who I think I was the last to publish or to do like a conference presentation. And, that time before, leading up to that point when my colleagues were doing conferences, that was really difficult because I just kept thinking, well, should I even be here? It's like I don't
Yes,
seem
yes,
to
yes.
be hitting the same milestones as them. And again, yeah, perhaps exacerbated by this industrial sponsor because it was almost like a kind of it was a strange relationship in that the industrial sponsor, even though they funded all of us, they definitely took a special interest in certain projects at certain times. And so it was kind of like they would give their attention to one of us. And, whoever had that, it would be great. So, that person would be called to give, maybe, summarize their research at, the company itself, at their headquarters, which was kind of, a very glamorous opportunity, right? You go to their
Yes.
flashy offices and you present your research. And for me, that never really happened because
Right.
what I realized is the other projects were kind of more on the technical side. And it just so happened that the sponsor was more interested in that kind of technical findings than my side, which was more the sort of user research, user experience stuff, which is a bit more difficult to quantify. So
Right.
it was, I learned quite quickly that actually my research was not as quote unquote attractive to them. And that was really difficult as well. If I'd
Yes.
see my colleagues, going off to present, and again, I would just be thinking, am I, is there anything here that's gonna get me the degree at the end? And that really, yeah, continued on. I think until about third year. And I think the thing that sort of changed it was sort of reflecting on that. And I was sort of, I was beginning to get to a point where I sort of felt really unhappy about the doctorate. And I really felt like there was nothing here that was going to get me the degree at the end. And I had a very good academic supervisory team. So I had 2 supervisors who, they were available. I met with them weekly, very easy to talk to. And they would always tell me that things were fine and, I was on track and they were happy. But for some reason, because I wasn't getting that same validation from
Yeah.
the industrial
Yeah.
sponsor
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
could see my colleagues do these different things, it was something that, yeah, it just takes over. And so, yeah, it was only until third year. And that's when, yeah, I started really trying to think about kind of methods that I could use to sort of kind of control that a bit. And I think the thing that really helped me was just taking a step back and just really trying to focus on just my own goals and appreciating, I guess, what I'm good at. And I guess sort of kind of letting go of that need for sort of that external validation and trusting kind of people closest to me, which were my supervisors, that really helped. And I
Mm.
think just really kind of focusing in on sort of what I was doing and the good things that I had achieved. And I think I think if you're on a doctorate program, uh, as I'm sure your listeners, listening, you know, the fact that you are there is, I think, such an achievement. And I think we often, because we're in this environment where everyone else is at that high level, we kind of forget that. But just being there,
Yeah.
um, doing the PhD, even if you've published or haven't published or you've presented at conferences, that's still all like really impressive stuff. So I think that was something that really helped me, was just to kind of hone in on that fact that it was a really good thing to be where I was. Um, and I think also just to kind of then take another perspective on that was recognizing that, of course, the people you look at and compare yourself to, you're only seeing like a small slice of kind of what they're going through. And
Yeah.
actually what I learned, towards the end, and you know, rather unfortunately, was that my other colleagues, they were also kind of struggling and going through their own problems. And looking back, I think I would wish I'd actually reached out to them. And I think I didn't reach out
Mm.
because I felt like that would be showing that you know I'm worried, or I'm not, I'm lacking confidence. And actually, one of them ended up not completing the doctorate, and that was a person I was comparing myself to. And I think that's recognizing that everyone has kind of things that they're going through and challenges. I think just kind of humanizes everything, and just sort of might help you kind of open up to someone else, and they might open up to you. And actually, that whole thing about comparing yourself then seems really kind of silly in the end. And so I think that was something that really kind of opened my eyes, and just sort of made me think that even now that I take forward today is that everyone has challenges, and actually let's just connect with people, and share the challenges we're going through. And we might find that they're going through the exact same thing, and so the person you're kind of putting on a pedestal, or perhaps again comparing yourself to, you might actually have a lot more in common than you think. And I think that just comes from just having that open conversation. And yeah, those are the things that really helped me control that sort of urge to kind of compare myself to others.
Oh yes, wise words indeed. We're all on a journey. We're all on a journey. And this sense of, yeah, we don't know what other people. You are looking at other people's highlight reels, and you see your own sort of backstage. But I think this issue of comparing yourself to others is so interesting, isn't it? Because obviously, you come more from the sciences. I come more from the humanities, where people are quite often working on their own. And they go, "Oh, I wish I was with a group of other people." Actually, having a group of other people isn't always the gift that you think it
That's
might
right.
be, because it can lead to this thing and this sense of it being so important, as you say, within the PhD to kind of run your own race. And I think coming out of that of undergraduate, isn't it, when we are, I mean, sadly it's become very competitive, hasn't it? And you are
Mm.
comparing people are within a class and want to ace the class. And this sense of, on the PhD, it isn't like that. People, as you say, people are working on very different projects. It's not like we're all writing the same essay. We're not all on the
Absolutely.
same course. It's kind of, we're all doing PhDs, but they're gonna be different, and they're going to work at different paces. This sense of, as you were saying, your project has a different setup, so it may take much longer to get to the point of publication. But that doesn't mean that when you get to the point of publication, you might have 3 or 4 publications in a row where someone else has published earlier but only published one. And it it's very easy for us to say this, but this sense of kind of really, as you said, coming back to thinking about what's working for you in your project, and having a sense of really grounding yourself in that, and listening to those people who know your project well, rather than uh, just projecting out, as you say, to what other people might be doing. Because
Yeah,
you're acing your own project rather than needing to be better than other people.
exactly. And yeah, I mean, I got my first publication. I think it was close to just after I'd submitted it. By the time it was actually published, so that's the fourth year when I had my first journal, and then kind of the journals came after that. But so it's really, I think it's so easy to get sucked in, because it's, as you say, it's kind of it's almost like you're in a kind of bubble, right? And
Yeah,
you kind of
yeah.
forget sort of, again, the sort of great accomplishments that you've made sort of getting to that point. So yeah, I think, really focusing on your own journey, and just, I think, reaching out to people, and just being open about, hey, I feel, I don't feel very confident. I'm worried about this or that. And then you find that actually everyone, no matter how kind of put together they may seem on the outside, everyone has kind of things that they're going to be worried about, particularly with doctorate, because it is a challenging thing, right? And it's and a good point you made there. Coming out of undergraduate where things are fairly prescribed,
Yeah.
you kind of follow a route. This is now pretty much in your own control, right? And it's your own project, and um, that's a difficult transition. So I think connecting with other students, and I guess shows, podcasts like yourself, like the show that you do, Emma. I think, hopefully this is kind of raising the point that, everyone goes through these things, and I think seeking help and, getting support, I think, is one of the most important things to do. And hopefully that will kind of help you realize that by comparing yourself to others, there's nothing useful there, and just focus on your own journey and where you're going.
And I think, as you were saying, reaching out to other people, because if anybody is telling you they know exactly what they're doing in their project, then you'd worry about the quality of their research, because research is going into the unknown. That's what it is.
Absolutely.
So every good researcher is attending to the unknown. Questions are coming up. There's uncertainty. That's what it's all about. And so this sense of kind of saying, actually, my project could go this way, it could go that way. I'm not sure about it. I've got questions about it. Brilliant.
Yes.
And so if somebody else is saying, well, actually, I've got no problems, and I've got, like, okay, so are you actually going into the lab at all, or have you actually, because that's the nature of what we're doing. And again, that's very different to undergraduate, because somebody has kind of ironed out a lot of the issues for you. Whereas in this PhD research, you are grappling, you are at the, you are at the cutting edge, and all the challenges, but all the thrill of that as well, in terms of making those discoveries and dealing with uncertainty. That's the gift, although we may not always want that gift on a Wednesday morning. Grappling with uncertainty may not be what we want.
No, I think that's such an important point. Yeah.
And I think, and you mentioned there about me doing this podcast. You, of course, have your podcast where you are How to PhD, which is brilliant. I totally recommend it if people haven't found it before. But again, in terms of sharing, really sharing your experiences, and your partner is there with you, sharing her experiences too from a very different perspective. So it's very useful. And I think this sense of, I think there is a movement, and I think it is a joy to be part of it, in terms of opening up these discussions that quite often have gone on behind closed doors, but everybody is having. It feels really healthy, actually.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's great that there's now also these platforms, where I guess, doctorate students can connect from around the world. And it's amazing, despite being on opposite sides of the world, that we still have the same kinds of challenges and worries. And absolutely. Really, really grateful that, having experienced those things in my doctorate around that kind of anxiety, that we can now share that, and hopefully for your listeners and future doctorate students, can go into the process with, better equipped with that kind of knowledge.
I love it. And I'm aware of time, because we could keep on talking about this, but I do hope this has been encouraging for people in terms of stay in your own lane. You're doing okay, and sometimes it's useful to be on your own, maybe, to do your own thing. So I am aware of time, and I always ask, rather unfairly, at the end of the episode, for people to share a top tip or top tips around the issue. So do you have any thoughts to leave us with?
Yes, I was thinking about this, and I think, where we talked a lot about sort of being able to kind of connect with other people and other researchers. I think the very simple tip that I started doing, which really helped me, was actually just going to colleagues and actually asking for their opinion and their help, was actually some of the most useful things that I did. So if I had a journal that I was writing, or a chapter, or whatever it was, or a presentation, I would never, ever ask anyone for help, because I felt like that was an admission of not being able to do it myself. And I guess it all came down to kind of comparing myself and all this, but actually just opening up and just saying, hey, do you mind kind of having a quick look at this for 5 minutes, or could I get your opinion? And what that does is, one, it opens you up, right? It just makes you more accessible, and it just gets over that kind of comparing yourself to others and all that sort of stuff. But it also, from the other person's perspective, it's a great like it's a great like flattering thing if someone comes to you for
Yeah.
help. And
Yeah.
it, for them, they thought, oh, great, yeah, I'm happy to help. And then I found that then they would come to me for help. And then suddenly there was this completely new thing that came out of it, and a new relationship and a trust between us. And again, this, I think, just being able to ask for help, not just my supervisors, but colleagues, that was one of the most useful things I did in terms of being able to get over that kind of comparison to others. And yeah, hopefully that's a useful tip for your listeners.
Oh, this is so useful. And what a gorgeous person you are. But and in terms of this thing, and as you say, this is culture changing as well. And I think this is really, really great advice. And as you say, it's not being a burden to someone else. Actually, you're giving them the opportunity, and you're giving them a gift in terms of saying, I think you're worthy of asking your advice. And that's always a lovely thing. So what brilliant, brilliant, brilliant tip. Thank you.
Right.
Thank you so much for being here and for sharing all of that. As I say, we will put in the show notes the details of where people can find out more about your podcast and more about you. Thank you so much for all that you do, and thank you all for listening.
No, thank you. And thank you for having me on the show, and for the great work that you do on your podcast. So yeah, really appreciate being here.
Thanks, Arun.